A contact print is the same size as the negative. A contact sheet of all the negatives on a roll makes it easy for you to examine and compare different frames, so you can choose ones to enlarge. Then you can file the contact with the negative for later reference. The following method uses an enlarger as the light source and a contact printing frame to hold the negatives and printing paper. Step 1. Position the enlarger. Close the slot where the negative carrier is inserted in the enlarger head so that light will shine only on the baseboard and is not coming out from the slot. This is particularly important in a school group's dark room because stray light can fog other people's prints. Switch on the enlarger lamp. Place the printing frame on the enlarger baseboard. Raise the enlarger head until the light covers the entire printing frame. Step 2. Set the lens aperture and the enlarger timer. As a trial exposure, set the enlarger lens aperture to f11 and the timer to 3 seconds. Do a test strip using 3-second intervals. Step 3. Identify the emulsion sides of the negative and paper. The emulsion side of the negatives must face the emulsion side of the paper. Film tends to curl towards its emulsion sides, which is duller than the back side. The emulsion side of the paper is shinier and with glossy papers, smoother than the back side. Step 4. Insert the negatives and one sheet of paper in the printing frame. The paper goes to the bottom emulsion side up. The negatives go above the paper emulsion side down. The glass top of the frame sandwiches the negatives and papers together tightly. If you don't have a printing frame, you can simply put the paper on the enlarger baseboard, the negatives on the top of it, and plain sheet of glass overall. Step 5. Expose and process the print. With the printing frame in the place under the enlarger head, push the timer button to turn the enlarger light on and expose the print. Process the paper. After fixing, evaluate the print. And lastly, evaluate the print. Some of the frames will be lighter, others darker, depending on the exposure each received in the camera. The judge print exposure overall. Examine the film edges in the print. They should be black, but with the edge numbers legible, and with 35 mm film, a very slight difference between the edges and the darker sprocket holes. The photo enlarger. Part 1. Setting up the enlarger. Place your negative in the enlarger carrier. The enlarger carrier is a plastic tray that slides out of the enlarger. To put your negative in it, open up the tray and insert the negative into it so the image you want to enlarge is lined up with the square hole in the tray. Then close the tray and slide the carrier back into the enlarger. The enlarger will project your image upside down, so invert it when you place it in the carrier. Clamp the enlarger down over the carrier. Clamping down the enlarger will seal the negative inside of the enlarger carrier. The right way to clamp down the enlarger will depend on the photo enlarger you're using, but there's usually a switch or lever on the side of the device that you're supposed to pull or turn. If you turn the switch to unlock the enlarger carrier so you could slide it out, turn that switch again to clamp down the enlarger. Position a sheet of scrap paper on the project plane. The projection plane is the flat frame that holds the paper you'll be projecting onto. Lift up the top layer of the frame and insert a scrap piece of paper before closing it again. Then place the frame back down on the base of the enlarger. Don't use regular photo paper yet, since the lights in the room will ruin it. Turn off the light in the dark room. Turning the lights off will make it easier to see your image projected on the piece of scrap paper. It is also important that you turn the lights off since you'll be working with actual photo paper later on. If the lights are on when you remove the photo paper from the packaging, it will be ruined. Make sure the dark room you're in is completely closed off from internal source of light. Turn the enlarger on using the timer. Timer is the small box that's connected to the enlarger by a cord. To turn the enlarger on, locate the on switch on the timer and flip it. After you flip it, the display on the timer should light up. Then press the outlet focus to turn the light bulb inside the enlarger on. Once you turn the light bulb on, you should see your image projected on the scrap piece of paper. Adjust the height of the enlarger until the image fits on the scrap paper. There should be a knob on the enlarger near the back or the side that allows you to raise and lower it. When you raise the enlarger, the projected image will get bigger, and when you lower the enlarger, the image will get smaller. Focus the image using the knob on the side of the enlarger. When you first enlarge a negative, it will likely be out of focus. To fix that, turn the knob clockwise or counterclockwise until the image looks clear and crisp. When you adjust the focus knob, a lens on the enlarger will move up or down, changing the focus. Set the aperture on the enlarger to f8 for most photographs. The aperture setting determines how wide the lens opening on the enlarger is. The higher the aperture, the wider the lens and the more light that passes through. The more light that passes through, the brighter your image will be. To adjust the aperture, rotate the lens on the enlarger until you get to f8. The right aperture setting can vary depending on the image you're printing, but generally, f8 is a good place to start. Part 2. Testing the exposure. Cut a strip of photo paper to test the exposure with. Before you print into full-size sheet of photo paper, you'll need to test several exposures time on a strip of photo paper to see which time is best for your image. Cut a strip that's wide enough to capture a detailed portion of the image. The size of the strip doesn't need to be precise. You'll need to use actual photo paper to test the exposure since you'll be developing it. Place the strip of paper on the projection plane. Open up the top of the frame and place the strip inside of it, then close the frame. Position the strip so it will capture a detailed portion of the image, which will make it easier to determine which exposure time is best. Expose the entire strip of paper to light for 2 seconds. First, use the dial on the timer to set the exposure time to 2 seconds. Then press the start button on the timer to turn on the light bulb inside the enlarger. After 2 seconds, the light should turn off. Cover 1/5 of the strip and expose the rest of it for another 2 seconds. Use a piece of thick scrap paper to cover up the end of the strip. That way, that portion of the strip won't be exposed to any more light and you'll be able to see what 2 seconds of light exposure looks like. Once you develop it, after you cover 1/5 of the strip, set the timer to 2 seconds and press the start button. At this point, the rest of the strip will have been exposed to light for 4 seconds. Repeat until you've exposed 5 sections of different duration of light. For each additional section, increase the exposure time. Use the following schedule for the remaining 3 sections. Cover 2/5 of the strips and expose it to 4 seconds of light. Cover 3/5 of the strips and expose it to 8 seconds of light. Cover 4/5 of strips and expose it to 12 seconds of light. Develop the test strips. Dip the strip of the paper in a development bath for 60 seconds, then transfer into the stop bath for 30 seconds, stirring it continuously. Next, submerge the paper into fixed bath 30 seconds. Finally, rinse it with water for 1 to 2 minutes. When you're finished developing the image, you can turn the light box on. Use the test strip to determine the best exposure time for your final print. Your developed image should be divided into 5 distinct sections. Choose the section that looks the best, not too bright and not too dark, and write down the exposure time for that section so you can use it for your final print. The exposure times for the different sections are: first section 2 seconds, section 2 4 seconds, third section 8 seconds, fourth section 16 seconds, and fifth section 28 seconds. Make a more specific test strips if none of the exposures look quite right up. The test strip is a good way to narrow down what exposure time might be best for your image. However, if none of the strip colors are what you want, try making another test strips with exposure times in closer increments. Part 3. Enlarging and developing your final print. Turn the lights off again. Do this before you remove the photo paper for your final print, so it's not ruined by the light if it's not still on. Turn the red safety light on so you can see what you're doing. Place a full sheet of photo paper on the projection plane. Lift up the top of the frame, insert the paper, and close the frame. Then place the projection plane on the base of the enlarger. Expose the paper to light using your desired exposure time. Set the exposure time on the time using the dial. Then make sure the projected image is lined up with the photo paper and press the start button on the timer. For example, if you like the image quality for 16 seconds of exposure time on the test strips, you'd set the timer to 16 seconds. Develop your final print. Repeat the developing process that you used for the test strips. Start with the development bath for 60 seconds, then dip the paper in the stop bath for 30 seconds. Finally, transfer the paper to the fixed bath for 30 seconds before rinsing it off with water. When you finish your developing your final print, hang it up to dry it in the dark room.